Thank you very much, Roland. Tedef.
Colonel Lavoie, Niklas from German television. Can you give us an idea what the strategy of NATO is at the moment, whether you are bombing directly in Tripoli, for example, where Gaddafi is supposed to be now, or what are the targets of NATO at the moment in Tripoli? This is my first question, and if you allow a second one, how many soldiers do you still expect there in Libya to work for Gaddafi?
First, regarding the strategy, our mission remains. We continue to protect the civilian population, to be vigilant, to enforce, of course, the no-fly zone and the arms embargo. We are doing it 24/7. We have done it since March, and we are continuing to do exactly the same thing. Regarding the situation in Tripoli, I could not comment the current operations, of course, but I could tell you that we remain vigilant and we will take out and strike at targets if they pose a threat against the civilian population. This is what we have done since the beginning and what we will continue to do with full determination. With respect to the number of soldiers at the disposal of the Gaddafi regime, this is not something we could estimate with precision. What I could tell you, however, it's not much the number of soldiers that you have that counts, because many of them could be demobilized or return in their countries if we talk about mercenaries. What is important is the ability to fight. And I could tell you that since the beginning of this campaign, we have severely eroded the Gaddafi regime military capability to a point that their command and control capabilities are severely affected, that they have severely reduced logistical capabilities, mobility capabilities, because they don't control many axes within the country. And they have a lot of senior leaders who have either defected or who have been captured. So basically, let's be clear here, despite the noise that they could be making today in Tripoli, the Gaddafi regime has passed the tipping point and it's going down. So for us, it's more a matter of when than if it's indeed the case.
Follow-up.
Because I still would like to understand, I've understood that you are protecting civilians, but I still would like to know how you are doing it now in Tripoli, where there are, I think, many people around this bunker where Gaddafi is supposed to be. And what are the military targets NATO can have if there are so many people around? What are you doing there?
As I mentioned, I will not comment current operation as we are conducting them now. But what I could tell you is that there's still weapons out there, and there's still targets that we could hit if we have any signs that they could represent a threat to the civilian population. No later than yesterday, we took out, for example, two BM-21 who were basically firing in the direction of Brega from the west of the city. So these weapons were actually firing when we engaged them. Of course, in the urban city of Tripoli, the situation is far more complex, but we still do have the precision munition that could allow us to take some targets if, again, we believe that there's an immediate threat against the civilian population. We have done so in the past. We have taken some facilities, buildings, pieces of artillery, radar sites with very accurate precision. So we have the capability to do so. And believe me, we will do so if there's any threat against the population.
James?
Yes, Brooke Signer, James Defense. Two questions. Unless Tripoli falls quickly, the rebels are going to need close air support. Has NATO categorically ruled out that option, providing it to them, that is? And secondly, the NATO nations are debating today and later on the renewal of the mandate. Do you foresee any need for the use of combat aircraft after mid-September? Thank you.
I will only talk about the first part, which is about close air support. We do not provide close air support. And let's keep in mind that the the situation in Greater Tripoli is very complex. We talk here about urban fighting. So basically, being engaged directly beside combatant would not really be practical. What we're doing is more to look at what is, and I can't go into the details, but essentially we're looking at what is going on the ground and what we could identify as a threat to the civilian population. It might not be on the front line. It might be in the approaches of Tripoli if there's movements of vehicles. It could be if we identify a command and control node from where there's communications giving orders or directions to conduct attacks. These are examples. So yes, we can be active in Tripoli, but no, we do not provide closer support to the anti-Gaddafi forces.
On your second question, Brooks, this mission isn't over. The mandate stands, and NATO remains vigilant. As you know, NATO extended, together with our operational partners, extended the mandate at the end of June for another 90 days. So the operation is still ongoing. Clearly, we will continue to adapt in light of what's happening on the ground. The situation remains fluid on the ground, and any adaptation will be done following advice from the military authorities, as ever, and decisions will have to be taken by the North Atlantic Council, as ever. But at the moment, we continue to assess, to consult, and discuss both within NATO, with the military authorities, with our operational partners, and of course, with all the other relevant international actors in this crisis. BBC.
Thanks. It's Chris Morris from BBC. Two questions. First of all, what advance notice did NATO have of the rebel offensive against Tripoli? Presumably it didn't come as a complete surprise to you. And secondly, just referring back to the initial question, there's clearly a lot of outgoing fire at the moment from Gaddafi's bunker and compound in Tripoli, but that's mainly because it's under attack by rebel forces. Does that mean it constitutes a legitimate target for NATO?
In terms of advance notice, we have allied contacts on the ground, so we have a quite good understanding of the large scale, if you wish, movements of troops on both sides, actually. Of course, we are not coordinating what we do in a tactical fashion with any of the key players. So we do not certainly coordinate tactical operations with the anti-Gaddafi forces. So I guess that touched your first questions. The second question, you were referring to what is going on. Could you repeat your second question, please?
Yeah, just in terms of the mandate. I mean, there is a lot of reports suggest there is a lot of fire coming out of the bunker, the compound in the middle of Tripoli, where Gaddafi may or may not be. And a lot of that fire may well be going towards civilians. But probably the primary reason for that fire coming out of the compound is because rebel forces are attacking it. So I want to know whether you think that makes it a legitimate target for NATO action.
For the moment, we had no signs that the anti-Gaddafi forces behave in a way that is not consistent with the UN resolution. Having said that, we revert to our mandate, which is to protect the civilian populations, and we are maintaining a vigilance there over the situation there. I will not speculate on any future operations. What I could tell you is that we have received assurances from the National Transitional Council that they want to respect the letter and the law of international laws. And basically what we are seeing on the ground essentially reflects that. If I remind you some of the atrocities that occurred in the last weeks and months, and no later than yesterday when you had a Scud missile being launched towards an urban area, I think it shows clearly that this is the pro-Gaddafi forces here that are conducting very aggressive repression of the population.
Roland, we can go to you in Naples for the next 3 questions, if there are any.
Everybody say that now the end of the regime is really close, near, but might not be a matter of hours. So now that the situation has changed, what do you think? How long you need to get to the end? So another month can be enough?
I think we have to look at it from a global perspective. Like, probably there's nobody, and if somebody would claim so, I would probably challenge it. There's nobody who could predict exactly when exactly the Gaddafi forces will finally drop their weapons. They will do so probably when there will be a political settlement to their conflicts. So nobody could say exactly when. What I could tell you in more general terms, however, is that over the last few months, the Gaddafi regime has been eroded gradually. And initially, we could not necessarily see the difference it could make on their ability to conduct aggressions from a day-to-day fashion. However, over time, they have lost the capability to maintain their repression. What we're seeing now is not a major offensive from military people. What we see is the populations, is doctors, teachers, farmers, citizens who basically realize that suddenly control over their cities and villages is not fully controlled anymore, and that they have the opportunity to uprise, which makes it quite encouraging, but also quite difficult to predict. Because we don't talk about military formations advancing and doing a conquest here. We talk about simple citizens who suddenly realize that they could take their destiny in their hands and do something about it. So I think there's no doubt it's coming. The exact when, we'll see.
Is it true that NATO already allowed ground troops to fight close to the rebels in Libya, in Tripoli? Thank you.
For the first question, where's Gaddafi? If you know, let me know. We don't know. I don't have a clue. And I'm not sure, actually, that it really does matter. In the sense that the resolution of this situation will be political. And I think everybody recognizes that Gaddafi will likely not be part of that solution. He's not a key player anymore. So from that perspective, we don't know, but I don't think it really matters. Although I recognize the symbolic value that it could have for his supporters. In terms of having ground troops in Libya, if you refer to NATO ground troops, this is not considered at all. Our mandate is very, very strict. Do an arm embargo, enforce a no-fly zone, and protect the civilian population. And this is what we'll continue to do.
Hi, Jeff Zazulowicz with Stars and Stripes. Here's a quick hypothetical for NATO. Let's say that NATO surveillance over the skies somehow tracks Gaddafi, fleeing from a location that you didn't think he was coming from. Under the mandate, does he get targeted at that point? And kind of a second question, in terms of the discussions being held today, is there any kind of timetable for a decision on or anything that will be announced by the NATO member states regarding the next step should the rebels consolidate their gains?
I could take the first one. We do not target individuals, and Gaddafi is not a target from NATO. If Gaddafi leaves the country and let the political process to help find a solution, frankly, we'll just be happy about that. He is not a target. Of course, part two of the answer, we do target command and control facilities. So if Gaddafi is located in a facility that commands and controls attacks, these are legitimate targets and we will strike. I will not comment on the other part that might be more for Brussels.
On the second question, obviously, we will keep you all informed about any decisions today and in the future, as we have throughout this crisis and as ever. Next question, Europa Press.
Thank you, Colonel. Ana Pisonero from the Spanish news agency Europa Press. The rebels claim that they control already 95% of Tripoli. I don't know if you can confirm this. And also, yesterday we could see some wires that were talking about tanks, presumably from the regime, of course, leaving the presidential palace. So I don't know if these threats for the population are still there on the ground, or what can you identify as the main menace for the population now in Tripoli?
Thank you for the question. Giving a percentage is always a risky business, and I remind also that we're not on the ground to count assets. What I could tell you is that globally, Tripoli is not under Gaddafi control anymore. I would not risk going into percentages because there's still obvious pockets of fightings, and it links me to your second question. The situation in Tripoli is still very serious and very dangerous, especially in the light of the missile attack, for example, that Gaddafi conducted no later than yesterday in an urban area. Snipers, shelling, missile launches could do some serious damage. It could not change the course of history or change the course of this campaign, of course, but it could be quite harmful for the population, which explains why we are keeping on with our mandate, by the way.
Over there.
Oh, you talk also about
Robert Nisbet,
tanks
Sky
leaving.
News. In talking about the principles, imagining a post-Gaddafi Libya, you talk about NATO playing a supportive role. What would that supportive role involve?
There is clearly a leading role in Libya in the post-Gaddafi period, which has already started. And that is for the United Nations and the contact group. And we welcome the fact that both have announced meetings as a matter of urgency. We continue to hold staff-to-staff meetings and to be involved in those consultations actively. NATO, as I said, will have a supporting role if required. On request, NATO will consider how it can play a role in helping stabilize Libya further. The details remain to be discussed, as I said, with our military authorities, within NATO itself, with our contributing partners, and of course with the international organizations in the lead and with the Libyan people who are in the lead themselves in their transition. FT.
Peter Spiegel with the Financial Times. First question for Naples. Colonel, just to follow up on the 95% question, let's putting percentages aside, can you give us your assessment of how accurate the assessments from the Transitional Council have been, particularly given the recent incident with Saif al-Islam, where they claim to have captured him and apparently he was not captured? Are you relying on their assessments, and do you find them credible? And then one for Juana, if I can ask to drill down a little bit more on what's going to happen this afternoon. You mentioned in your opening remarks that they're going to review options for future. Can you just talk a bit about tasking? Has the military committee actually been tasked to look at specific options for post-Gaddafi, either peacekeeping, stability operations? I believe at the Defense Ministerial, the Secretary General said that they were waiting for guidance from the UN, But if they're meeting this afternoon to talk about that, it would imply that there was some work being done in the military committee to either plan for or present options for post-Gaddafi stabilization. Can you address that? Thank you.
I'm afraid you may not find my answer fully satisfactory because NATO is not in the business of assessing military capabilities of belligerents in a conflict in which we are only a party with a limited role, which is basically to enforce the embargo, the no-fly zone, and to protect the population. Of course, we have an overall appreciation of the situation, and it is quite clear, we could even watch it on TV, that the regime has lost its control over key strategic areas over the country. But I will not venture into guessing percentages or commenting on other people's estimates.
Peter, first on Saif al-Islam. A brief appearance at the dead of night doesn't indicate to me somebody who's in control of a country or capital or of anything much at all, really. It shows that the remnants of the regime are on the run, and it's up to the Libyan people to decide the fate of the three who've been indicted by the International Criminal Court once they're caught. And as we've seen very recently in the Balkans, those who are on the run from international justice may be on the run for some time, but they can't hide. In terms of what will be decided this afternoon, as I said, and you won't expect me, I think, to prejudge the discussions of the ambassadors of the North Atlantic Council. Rest assured, we'll let you know as soon as decisions are taken, and also rest assured that NATO will continue to make prudent planning for all contingencies, as we have done from the beginning of this crisis, and as we do as a serious security organization. And I think we've all seen that prudent planning has been paying off with a very effective campaign.
You can't address though whether the military committee has been tasked to prepare something for this in anticipation of the meeting?
The military authorities are always asked to provide their assessments on a regular basis to inform the decisions by the North Atlantic Council. Reuters?
I have a sort of a broader question. Could you assess over time to what extent that NATO coordinated in any way with the rebels in terms of surveillance, picking targets, of any kind of coordination? And if there was any, how did that change over the last months since March?
We do not coordinate with the opposition. We do our missions, which is basically to do the no-fly zone, the embargo, and the protection of the Syrian population. Of course, we obtain information from our allied nations who have a presence in the ground to know what is going on and to know where and when we should act to better accomplish our mandate. But we are not in direct contact with the anti-Gaddafi forces to coordinate attacks or to coordinate maneuvers.
We can go back to you, Roland, if there are any more questions from Naples. If not, we've got quite a few still here in Brussels.
We have one.
Colonel, could you just clarify that last answer? You said you obtain information from allied nations with the presidents on the ground who know what's going on. There's been some media reports stating that British and French special forces have been arming and training the rebels through, in different parts of the conflict. Did that happen? Was that outside of the NATO umbrella, or can you kind of elaborate a bit more on what you meant by allied nations with a presence on the ground who knows what's going on?
You could understand that as a spokesperson for NATO, I can't comment on other nation activities in Libya. But of course, in general terms, we do have eyes and ears in the country. which is basically that intelligence is basically merged with the intelligence we could get from our own means also for this operation.
Die Welt.
Stefanie Bolzen, German Daily Die Welt. My question goes to you, Juana. I know you're saying the situation is still very fluid, but talking about the next steps, there is kind of like a waiting atmosphere that the UN comes out and there will be a decision that UN will take over whatever will be necessary, peacekeeping troops or whatever. So my first question is, it's in Europe's nearest neighborhood, wouldn't it be a duty of the Europeans and NATO to take over the responsibility here? And second, what do you expect from the regional players, from the African Union and the Arab League? Which initiative should they take now?
Stefanie, we've seen the United Nations and the contact group, together with other international and regional organizations, in the lead on the political front from the start in trying to bring this crisis to a solution. NATO is implementing a mandate from the United Nations Security Council resolution, and we will continue to do that until all attacks and threats of attacks against civilians have stopped, until all of Gaddafi's forces have withdrawn to base, and until there is full and free humanitarian access, as NATO and our partners have decided in Berlin in April. These are the three clear military goals. But we've also made clear that in the post-Gaddafi period, NATO will take a supporting role if required. It is for the United Nations and the contact group to take the lead in conducting any stabilization operations, in taking decisions and as to how to support the people of Libya build a stable and secure future. NATO is willing to help in a supporting role if requested and if needed. So we've made clear also that there will be no NATO troops on the ground in the future, as there are no NATO troops on the ground right now. And as we've seen in the past, I trust, and we've already seen that all the international actors involved in this crisis have stepped up to the plate and played their full role in bringing this crisis to a solution that responds to the legitimate aspirations of the Libyan people. We had a question over there.
Oui, bonjour, Lila Lefebvre, Al-Hiwar Télévision. Ma question, je la poserai au colonel Roland Lavoie. Colonel, s'il s'avère que le pays voisin de la Libye, l'Algérie, s'il s'avère qu'elle abrite de grands responsables du régime Kadhafi et même un certain nombre de la famille de Kadhafi, quelle serait la position de l'OTAN par rapport à ça, en sachant que l'Algérie est signataire d'un certain nombre de conventions internationales et qui est aussi partenaire du dialogue OTAN-Méditerranée. Merci.
Notre mission est très claire. Elle est limitée à l'imposition d'une zone d'interdiction de vol, l'imposition de la mise en œuvre d'un embargo et évidemment la protection de la population civile au sein du territoire libyen. Donc c'est un mandat très restreint que nous allons continuer à appliquer, mais qui se rapporte à aucun autre pays.
Évidemment, on s'attend à que tous les pays de la région, ainsi que tous les autres de la communauté internationale, respectent leur engagement internationaux et les résolutions du Conseil de sécurité de l'ONU. NPR.
Thank you. Terry Schultz with National Public Radio. the French defense minister has publicly called for NATO to step up its bombing of the main Gaddafi complex. He says that it would be symbolically important to show that there's no sanctuary. Given that you're saying it's not even really important where Gaddafi is, do you disagree that it would be important to destroy that complex? And also, for Juana, given that the TNC has actually been here and been recognized as the partner, the negotiator for the rebels, why is it that there is still no coordination?
With respect to the complex, we had strikes against that complex, and I'm not commenting about present or future operations, but we will continue to imply with our missions, and we will do strikes, conduct strikes wherever necessary to protect the population in Libya. So I won't speculate about the future, but it has to be very clear. We will strike at every threat that could be present in Libya against the civilian population.
The French are saying it would be symbolically important. You disagree. You're saying if it's not tactically important, you don't find it necessary to intensify the bombing.
As a matter of policy, I will never speculate about current or future operations or value of a military target. And if that location had no importance, we would not have struck it in the past. So this is, of course, not purely symbolic. When I was talking about symbolism, I was talking about Gaddafi himself. So I would say stay tuned.
On the National Transitional Council, clearly we are we consult with them, we are in touch with them. The mandate of this mission remains the same. The mandate is clear, and that is the protection of civilians and civilian populated areas, the no-fly zone, and the arms embargo. Over there.
You said that any future involvement of NATO in Libya would have to be on request. Would you specify what request, Libyan or international? And secondly, if you say that there will be no NATO boots on the ground in Libya, how do you imagine the role of NATO then in a post-conflict country where there is no fighting, with no boots on the ground? Thank you.
Could you please introduce yourself?
Vasilin Zhelov, Daily Truth, Bulgaria.
Those are very good questions, and I know you're trying to get me to say a bit more, and I will not prejudge the discussions of the ambassadors in the North Atlantic Council. Over there.
Oana, j'ai deux questions. Jean-Pierre Strobans du journal Le Monde. Dans l'émission que vous accepteriez le cas échéant, est-ce qu'il y aurait la possibilité de participer à une réorganisation des forces de sécurité libyennes? Et deuxième question, est-ce que vos évaluations vont également porter sur la durée de ce conflit? La plupart des experts qu'on peut interroger pour le moment estiment que 5 mois, ça a été beaucoup trop long compte tenu de la situation sur le terrain, et que si la mission avait été mieux alimentée en hommes et en moyens peut-être, ça aurait dû durer beaucoup moins de temps. Quel est votre avis là-dessus?
Jean-Pierre, le secrétaire général, a déjà dit dans un discours au début juin qu'une des possibilités qu'on pouvait envisager pour la période d'après Kadhafi serait une aide de l'OTAN pour la réforme du secteur de défense et de sécurité en Libye, comme peut-être dans d'autres pays de la région. Mais bien sûr, c'est un domaine où l'OTAN a une expérience extrêmement importante. Plusieurs de nos alliés ont fait ces réformes eux-mêmes, notamment après la chute du communisme. Alors on peut mettre cette expérience à la disposition de la Libye ou d'autres pays de la région. Mais comme j'ai déjà dit, tout ça reste à décider. Ça dépend s'il y a une demande le rôle de l'OTAN sera un rôle d'aide, ne sera pas le rôle principal et il n'y aura pas des troupes de l'OTAN sur le terrain. Pour la durée, on ne va pas faire maintenant, on ne va pas deviner la durée de ce conflit. Je crois que ce qui est important, c'est qu'on a vu une campagne extrêmement effective, une campagne où pendant 5 mois, on a réussi à démanteler une machine de guerre accumulée par le régime Gaddafi pendant presque 42 ans. Et on a vu les résultats de cette campagne dans le fait que le régime Kadhafi ne peut plus monter des campagnes massives contre sa population. Je ne sais pas si Roland voudrait ajouter quelque chose là-dessus.
Je crois que c'est déjà très éloquent, Oana.
Yes, another question, Brooks Tigner, Jane's Defense. So no troops on the ground in the future. Post-conflict, though, there can only be 2 roles for NATO. One would be a protective role, which you seem to be excluding, and the other would be security sector reform, if we exclude political context. But that's something I assume would be led by the other major organizations, since that's purely political. So that leaves security sector reform. In all instances, security sector reform involved 2 kinds of personnel, either civilian members of MODs or military. When you say no ground troops, are you excluding those people as well? Thank you.
Brooks, another excellent question. At the moment, I'm not going to go into any more details. As I said in a speech in June, the Secretary General mentioned the possibility of security and defense sector reform as one of the areas in which NATO could conceivably play a future possible role in Libya or in other countries in the region, but that, of course, would have to be if requested and if needed. So at the moment, we'll have to leave it at that. Over there, Agence Belga.
Oui, Gérard Gaudin, une question pour Oana. Est-ce qu'en faisant une comparaison, on peut dire qu'en Irak, il n'y a pas... en Irak, hein, je dis bien, la mission d'entraînement, etc., c'est no boots on the ground ou bien c'est considéré comme boots on the ground?
Est-ce que tu pourrais répéter?
La mission d'entraînement de l'OTAN en Irak,
oui.
Est-ce que c'est considéré comme étant boots on the ground ou pas?
C'est une mission d'entraînement, pardon. C'est une mission d'entraînement. Mais je ne vais pas vraiment préjuger des discussions. Pour le moment, ce qui est important, c'est qu'il y a une mission, il y a un mandat, et l'OTAN reste vigilant pour compléter le mandat qu'on a de la part des Nations Unies. C'est ça notre priorité. On fait bien sûr, on fait du planning comme on fait en tant qu'organisation de sécurité et de défense sérieuse. Et au moment où on a des décisions, dans la lumière de la situation sur le terrain, on va annoncer ces décisions comme on l'a toujours fait. Over there.
Ingeborg Eliassen, Stavanger Aftenblad, Norway. I wonder how important is it that Gaddafi and the other people in his family that have been warranted for arrest by the ICC come out of this alive? And what exactly do you do vis-à-vis the rebels to ensure that this happens? Thank you.
I think Roland has answered that question to some extent already. It is for the Libyan people to decide the fate of those who've been indicted for crimes against humanity and other serious crimes by the International Criminal Court. What is important is that the transition in Libya is to a state that is democratic, that respects human rights, that respects the rule of law, that is based on reconciliation and not violence or retribution. But obviously the rule of law is important, it must be respected, and we welcome the statements made in the last few days by the leadership of the National Transitional Council. I think those statements are very clear, and the roadmap that they've already presented to the contact group is also very clear and very welcome. We have one last follow-up over there.
Yes, it's a follow-up. When you say no NATO boots on the ground, does that formula exclude another formula, separate NATO members' boots on the ground under their own command?
I think I said no NATO forces on the ground, but obviously national decisions are national decisions. So I won't prejudge any national decisions that haven't even been made. So as Roland put it very clearly, as a matter of policy, we don't discuss hypothetical questions. And since we have entered the realm of hypothetical questions already, thank you very much.